How to get more clicks without ranking higher with Dan Petrovic from DEJAN Marketing. Brought to you by Majestic. I'm David Bain and this is SEO in 2022. Dan, what is your number one SEO tip for 2022?
Well, I'll be very brief and to the point. CTR optimization. Get on it, research it, see what it's all about. Of course, I'll get into more details as to what it is and what it does. That's the whole purpose of this session. But basically, something that is a norm in paid search is something that people hardly do in SEO and is one of the single most underutilized tactics that you could do. So I propose for not just next year, but starting this year, for people to really dive into their search console and check out what's going on in their click-through rates and start asking questions. Why is this click-through rate really high? Why is this one really low? And what can I do with that information? The key is in finding anomalies. Once you find an anomaly, you can do wonderful things with it.
So why have SEOs not really taken advantage of this before? Is it because the data really hasn't been available, or is it because perhaps it's just been easier just to rank new keywords higher?
It's the mindset, because it's free. If you were paying for that click, you would scrutinize the title, you would scrutinize the description, you would scrutinize the competition, you would really try to squeeze every click you can get out of that ad by improving that click-through rate. But if you have an organic result, people think it's God-given, it's granted. You know, we're just there. Let's rank higher. That's the mentality. Let's push it. Oh, we're ranking number 3. What can happen if we push it to number 2 or number 1? Well, I can tell you, I've seen situations where something increased in rank and lost click-through rates. And let me translate that. Something went up in rankings and lost clicks because it had a higher click-through rate on the last position than the second last position. So, and we've seen studies done by numerous bloggers and SEOs that propose and what an average click-through rate is for rank 1, for 2, all the way through to 10. And they think, okay, well, that's the model I should be using to find out what an average CTR is. Where the truth is a lot more complicated. 2 reasons. Two main reasons. There's a lot of reasons to that, but 2 big ones. Google's results are not just 10 results anymore. The user behavior on the search results page is not linear. The eyes are not going in the letter F sort of pattern. We're not going from top down and slowly scanning, moving our way down. It's more like a pinball machine now. Our eyes are darting around, going here, going there. There's all sorts of interesting and shiny things that people would like to click on. And Google's not helping us. They're helping the user by providing more direct answers. There are 0-click queries where people ask for weather and the weather shows up on the results page, and that's that. You get the sports results, all sorts of information can be presented like that. Lyrics. So all these special search features tend to distract users and take away from your clicks. So as part of understanding of the whole process, you also need to consider whether something has the low click-through rate is because that you did something, or is it something that Google did? For example, did you write a bad meta description, or do you have an uninteresting title, or is it just that Google has something shiny next to you, and there's nothing you can do to improve your situation in that that particular search configuration? So that's a little bit of depth that we just touched on as to how CTR works.
So in general, What does a great title and meta description look like that will encourage a high CTR?
Well, we've so far discovered a number of things, but the primary thing is that people don't read online. I've done this research several times. I can share the study with you. We've surveyed thousands of people over the years, and we found that people don't read. People skim, and just like when they land on an article, they don't read the whole article most of the time. They do the same thing with the search results. So things that you have available to you to create an interesting snippet is to have them brief, concise, to the point, and have some of the power words that tend to resonate within your audience. Some of those things could be titles phrased as questions. Some of them a little bit clickbaity, and they're like a trend that will fizzle out. In the movie industry, for example, you have the current trend is you need to watch, and then whatever movie title or the description of the genre, ASAP. And you can see that every website that does movies is copying, or reviews is copying the same format. You need to watch XYZ ASAP. And so this is something that they've intercepted that works really well. So this one is an instructional title that is telling people what to do. Go check this out. Stop what you're doing now and go click on and go watch this movie. So that's a call to action. Of course, you have your whole meta description, which gives a little bit extra information. You have your rich snippets schema available to you to use all the wonderful extra frills to your regular snippets. But some of the other things that people don't always consider, perhaps SERP geometry. Let's say everyone's packing their search results, their snippets, with lots of content and text. If you suddenly have a very brief 2-word title and a 1-sentence meta description, you now have a lot of negative space around you. You're standing out. So you actually create breathing space, visual breathing space around your snippet, having more focus towards your snippet. So those are just some examples. But the true key to finding out what the right thing to do with your snippets is to have a look at your data. There's no other way to see it, because one website is different to the other, and there are different industries, different purposes of website. A single website could have different rules for a good CTR. You could be on information pages, evergreen content, blog content, or product pages, e-commerce product pages, or category pages. They all behave very differently, and people may have different behaviors when they're browsing different things, because they'll have different intents. Then we have things like seasonality. You're a florist. You know which days are big for you, and the user behaviors will change during those times as well.
I love the fact that an SEO conversation nowadays involves great copywriting principles as well. So it's not just about the technical aspects of SEO or how many keyword phrases you can get into your title or your meta description or your page copy. Is it still necessary to have a target keyword phrase within the page title at the moment?
Well, this is something you need to be careful. When you're optimizing your snippet for better click-through rate, you have to ensure that your keywords that you want to rank for are in the title, because that's one of the most obvious signals to Google. Like if you think about, okay, you're a search engine and you'll land on a page, you're crawling the page, and in the title of that page, in the title of the document, you don't mention something. Well, that's a signal that something is not as important to you as it could be. So you still want to follow those traditional SEO rules when writing, but something that you said is like copywriting is super important, and micro copywriting is super important. Fine crafting your titles and descriptions is really, really important. I obsess over my titles and descriptions. I will spend half an hour on a single snippet, writing the title, rewriting it, changing my mind, and then when I'm finally happy with it, I run a test. I don't just trust it. I test it, and I compare before and after. So basically, if I've had a snippet with the title A and description A, and I've changed it to title B and description B, I'm now measuring period of 30 days to another period of 30 days from before and after when I changed the snippet and when Google picked it up in the results. So I'm then measuring the impact of my idea, what I thought was a great idea to improve the click-through rate, to see if it actually makes any difference. And typically it does make a difference, but sometimes it's a negative. So you could actually ruin your click-through rate by attempting to improve it. So that's something important that we need to keep in mind. Roll it out, test it, compare it. One thing when you're testing your click-through rates, don't compare your data on position 1 and position 2. It has to be position 1 to position 1, position 2, position 2 during that period of time. So we're comparing A and B over segmented positions. Obviously, position 1 and 2 will have different click-through rates by default because of the selection bias. So why am I talking about position 1, 2, and 3? Because you will appear on position 1, 2, and 3, and 7 during that period of time.
Yeah.
Maybe not to yourself, but to other users you will, because they might be on a different device, located in a different part of the world, or use a different language in their query. And all that will influence, or they might be influenced by their prior browsing history.
So what software do you use to do this, and how do you identify the time periods that have the correct positions that you can actually take the data to use?
Well, the main software that I use is Google Search Console, because that's really the only thing that gives you the actual real query data. So I start with that, and many years ago when I started this methodology, this framework, I used Excel. So I would import all the queries from Search Console into a spreadsheet, and I would use formulas to plot a CTR curve. And CTR curve informs me what an average click-through rate for each position is, which I can then run against the actual position and see if it deviates above or below the expectation. So later on, because I do this all the time for all my clients, I just went and developed my own software, which now sits under youre.com. So it's a special URL, u.youre.com. I'll send you a link afterwards. And I know that a good friend from Germany, Marcus, who has software Right, and they've actually implemented CTR element to their software as well, which I'm about to test drive and run a little session to see how it compares to my own framework. So these are the three. So you've got Excel, you've got Algoroo, and you've got Right. Those are the current choices, and perhaps there are some other tools out there that I'm unaware that do the same job. But the main thing is you can literally do this for free, assuming you're fairly competent at spreadsheets.
And that was Marcus Tandler, of course, you were talking about there. Now
Yes.
you're talking about wanting to improve your click-through rate. So say if you're ranking number 3 and you end up having a 10% click-through rate, and the position number 2 is actually getting a 5% click-through rate. If everything else is the same, will Google end up ranking you higher because of your click-through rate?
Well, Google uses click-through rate to learn and train their systems. But they have a layer of protection against real-time CTR manipulation. So if I just pay 100,000 people to click on something instead of something else, Google's going to find that a little bit suspicious. So I would say that they're using that more of as a training mechanism. But whether they use click-through rate as a algorithmic signal, oh yes, they do. Every search engine does. I mean, if you started up a brand new search engine, CTR would be one of your primary metrics to inform of user behavior on the SERP. But now Google has Android, they have Chrome, they have analytics, they have all sorts of wonderful, even fiber optics connections. They know what's going on. They have their finger on the pulse when it comes to web traffic. So for them, it's a very robust set of signals that they use for ranking. So I wouldn't worry about using CTR to sort of change the rankings, but I would be quite interested in looking at averages to detect anomalies and attach your ROI to different ranking scenarios. So the wonderful thing about working out potential of traffic you can squeeze out of extra click-through rate is that you can not just do that, you can also model your ranking projections based on increase in the rank itself, which is outside of the scope of this conversation, but you can use the same CTR data to model and say, okay, well, I'm ranking number 3 at this spot, assuming no CTR is changed. If I move one position up, you know exactly what your CTR rate will be on average, so you can project the traffic gains on the rank-based scenario, which is separate from the CTR increase scenario. So if you do a clever little thing by importing all your Google keywords from the ads campaigns, and all the non-ranking keywords, you can project for the things you don't rank for, what they will do if they rank using your CTR model. So finally, attaching your average order value, and if you say, for example, if you're an e-commerce website, if you attach an average order value and average conversion rate, that's a rudimentary ROI study where you can make projections and inform your decisions based on how much money you will make if you achieve certain scenarios, whether it be CTR optimization or rank gain, and that can inform whether you invest in content and which pages. Now, if we go one step further than that, we were so far focused on certain keywords, queries that people type in. Now, if you do a clever thing by mapping all the queries to the same URL that they belong to, you can then create a cumulative score of all the potential of the CTR lost for that URL by the sum of all its lost CTR across all its keywords. I know it sounds a little bit chewy as a concept, but effectively you're summarizing your CTR gains and losses per URL level rather than just looking at single keywords by grouping all the keywords to the URL, which is what we do always. We do keyword mapping, we do URL mapping. So this is a familiar concept, but just in the context of ROI calculations. So now you're facing a client who is facing their boss, the decision maker, and instead of just talking vague SEO improvements and SEO hygiene and crawling and this and that, you're saying you're showing financial outcomes, you're showing figures, your projections. And so ROI studies based on solid data can be really, really valuable to release cash when it's needed to do more SEO work, whether it be content or outreach or technical and so forth.
So if an SEO is struggling for time, what should they stop doing right now so they can spend more time focusing in on click-through rates in 2022?
People tend to obsess over link acquisition, and I've seen too many people earn links or make links or buy links towards blog pages or whatever, homepage, where in fact the links should be going towards the product pages, the pages you want to rank. But they're really difficult. And I'm going to circle back to branding. If you want to improve your click-through rate, you could rewrite all your titles. You could do clever things. But guess what? A web user is on the search results page, and they are going through the list. Suddenly, they have a familiar brand in the list. That is the single most overriding factor when somebody will decide, when they, let's say, there's a whole lot of unknowns, and suddenly there's an Airbnb. What are they going to do? They're going to click on Airbnb because they're familiar with it. They know there's trust behind it. So there's a whole range of benefits when it comes to CTR. So if you weren't busy with CTR, you should definitely invest in branding because it'll improve your CTR. Same thing you said just now, things that, and I answered with link building. Guess what? If you improve your brand, you'll get more traction out of link building. Because if you reach out to somebody and they recognize your brand, they'll be more willing to interact with you.
Great thoughts, great advice. And I love how I think how everything links back to the original conversation and click-through rate is wonderful as well. If you see an Amazon result, obviously, if you're looking to buy something and you've got an Amazon account, you're highly likely to click on that particular result. So, wonderful points. Dan, we could carry on this conversation for a long time, I'm sure, but I'm just going to say, look, you can find Dan Petrovic over at DEJANMarketing.com. Dan, thank you so much for being part of SEO in 2022.
Absolute pleasure.
Check out the rest of the content from SEO in 2022 over at SEOin2022.com.